But we begin with the latest from the White House.
They have to pay a fair rate. It's all. It's very simple. We like Canada. I love Canada. I have so many friends in Canada. But they've been very poorly led. They've been very, very poorly led. And all we want is fairness for our country. That's all.
Right now, Trump is hiking the border and fentanyl-related tariffs on Canada to 35%. That is on the Canadian goods that do not comply with the CUSMA Free Trade Agreement. Here is one way to see it. If we think of trade with the U.S. as traffic at a border crossing going south, data from the Bank of Canada suggests that the new higher tariffs would apply to just one narrow lane. But there are damaging tariffs on key sectors, too, like the 50% tariffs on steel and aluminum. That is already in place. There's the 50% tariff on copper that also takes effect today. But that one is not across the board, and it lessens the impact for some Canadian producers. There is also the 25% hit on Canadian-made vehicles. But again, there is a patchwork of carve-outs for the auto sector for U.S.-sourced parts. Megan Fitzpatrick, she is leading our coverage this hour from Ottawa. Megan, bring us up to speed. Walk us through the state of play.
It's a bit tricky to know the state of play, Katie, because government officials were pretty quiet yesterday. Dominic LeBlanc, the minister responsible for these trade talks, was in Washington, but we didn't see him on camera at all. He didn't hold a news conference or anything, and we didn't hear from Prime Minister Mark Carney yesterday either, as the clock was ticking down and these talks were going on. But we do know it was a late night in the Prime Minister's office, because we did get a statement from Carney posted on social media a little bit after midnight, and he's saying that the government is disappointed by this action, but that's about as much as he said in terms of reaction. Okay, so here's part of what he said in that statement. While we continue to negotiate with the United States on our trading relationship, the Canadian government is laser focused on what we can control, building Canada strong. Canadians will be our own best customer, creating more well-paying careers at home as we strengthen and diversify our trading partnerships throughout the world. Carney's been saying in his reaction, Katie, that Canada is going to focus on what it can control. So breaking down those internal trade barriers, working on those nation-building projects that the premiers have been pitching. He notes that, as you were just saying, there is this carve-out for goods that are compliant with the CUSMA, or USMCAs, they call it, on the other side of the border. But he does note those high tariffs on those certain sectors, aluminum and steel, autos, softwood lumber. And he indicates in this statement that the government, he says, will act to protect jobs, invest in our competitiveness, buy Canadian, and diversify our export markets. Carney was recently in Hamilton, Ontario, which is known as Steel Town, a major steel industry there, and he did announce some support measures. So perhaps more to come in terms of specific support for sectors that are being impacted by these ongoing tariffs. And that is what is wanted by the business community, we're hearing. They're anxious to know how the government is going to support the business community. Last night on our network, Dan Kelly from the Canadian Federation of Independent Business made it clear what his members are looking for Ottawa to do now that no deal was reached. Take a listen.
I'm not sure that the Pope himself could negotiate a trade deal with Donald Trump that would be suitable. But my advice to the federal government, in fact, I'm urging the federal government to release the tariff revenue that it has collected to support businesses, to support workers that are going to be affected by this. The uncertainty alone is deeply affecting them. They can't go any longer. The billions that have been collected in Canadian tariffs need to be released and put back in the economy if we want to keep some of these businesses going until such time as a deal can be made.
And he said he's been hearing from business owners that are now laying people off. But he said he agrees that Canada shouldn't sign a bad deal just to get a deal. but no deal is also bad. It's kind of a no-win situation. And really, that's what we've been hearing from Prime Minister Carney and from the premiers, too, who have backed the Prime Minister on this approach, that Canada is not going to sign a deal that is not in the best interests of Canadians. And we did not get a deal, Katie. So you kind of just have to read between the lines. It's hard to know exactly what was being negotiated, what was being offered, what was being rebuffed in terms of those offers. This is all happening behind closed doors. Hopefully we'll hear from the Prime Minister today in person and not by a statement, or from Dominic LeBlanc, who we understand is still in Washington.
Or whether these are traditional trade negotiations. Some of our reporting, I understand that there has been sort of a back and forth where the Canadians would come to the table with some ideas. They bring a document, as we previously reported, with suggestions on which way things could go. And the Americans weren't necessarily reciprocating and coming to the table with serious sort of suggestions to match that, or what next steps they would do in terms of how they wanted to change the trajectory or get to a final deal. So we've got that aspect of things right now. We know that we're hoping to hear from officials in Washington, from the Canadians in Washington right now. But what are you watching for next?
Yeah, well, we'll be watching it before those conversations, and perhaps if that phone call will happen today between Prime Minister Carney and President Trump. Trump had indicated yesterday that he called. We can assume he was referring to Carney, though we don't know that for sure. So will there be any talks at that high level today or in the coming days is something we're watching for, of course. And in terms of more reaction and more pleas in terms of what people are looking for the federal government to do now. Ontario Premier Doug Ford, for example, he posted a statement on social media last night saying, here's what it says: Canada shouldn't settle for anything less than the right deal. Now is not the time to roll over. We need to stand our ground. The federal government needs to hit back with a 50% tariff on U.S. steel and aluminum. And that is something that Ford has called for repeatedly. He wants those steel tariffs in particular matched. The steel industry, as I was saying, is very important in Ontario. Not all premiers are on board with that approach, though. We heard that when they gathered for their annual summer meeting last week, because reciprocal tariffs impact Canadian businesses and Canadian consumers on this side of the border. So they were a little more hesitant in terms of calling on Ottawa to take that approach. So we're watching to see if Canada does impose any more reciprocal tariffs, or if it'll just be status quo in terms of the ones we already have. In terms of more political reaction and what people are calling on Ottawa to do, the Conservative Party of Canada, its leader Pierre Poilievre, putting out a statement that says Conservatives continue to hold out hope for a deal to end all U.S. tariffs on Canada. That means zero tariffs on our steel, aluminum, softwood, autos, energy, agriculture, and everything else. And Poilievre saying in his statement that Canada needs to break its economic dependence on the United States, and is calling on Ottawa to repeal what he calls anti-development laws, and to cut taxes and a number of other measures as well. So today, tracking more reaction, Katie, and again, looking for more details from the government on specifics in terms of where talks are at. Carney obviously indicating in his statement that they're ongoing. They have not broken off, but where do things go now? Yeah, is one of the questions we'll be looking to get some answers to.
All right, Megan Fitzpatrick in Ottawa, thank you.
Welcome.